Are you moving the way nature intended? Learn how ancestral movements can revolutionize your health, prevent injuries, and unleash your body's true potential. Don't miss this chance to reclaim your built-in vitality. You're here with Welcome to WellwaveNOW. We are your portal to actionable wellness insights. Meet your empowerment team. First, there's Breck Rice, a healthcare disruptor, community and integrative wellness expert, decoder of medication complexities. Dr. Bob Levine, renowned brain researcher and leader in drug-free pain medication. And I'm gonna do that one again for you, Bob.
Thank you.
So Bob Levine, renowned brain researcher and leader in drug-free pain elimination. I'm sounding like I have a tough time like that governor who was at one of the conventions and he was getting through the nominations there and it took him 4 or 5 tries. It only took me 2. So.
Good job. Good job.
There you go. Way to go, Tim.
And I'm Tim Daniels, your wellness plan manager, builder of personalized wellness approaches with an expertise in pulse electromagnetic field therapy. Together, we are your wellness catalysts. We're committed to elevating your health, enhancing your functionality, and optimizing your performance at every life stage. We are here to provide you with innovative strategies to boost your happiness and unlock your body's full potential. WellwaveNOW, your timeless wisdom that lights your wellness path. So today we're going to take you on the ancestral movement path. And so what is an ancestral movement? This is part of our series on exercise as medicine. And so ancestral movement goes back to the patterns that our ancestors had millennials ago. And what they did, our bodies were designed for movement, and whether you're a creationist or evolutionist, we had those certain patterns that we do. And if you go back to the time when people were kind of more nomadic or hunter-gatherers, there were different types of things the body was structured to do and did undertake. And then we went through more of an agrarian phase, and that still was a lot of before the Industrial Revolution and the delivery of certain machines in the farming, that still did a lot of movement. It got you into things so we go through those phases of the hunter and gathering, the farming before mechanization. There were a lot of things such as lunges and hunting to go after things. You climbed rocks, you climbed to trees to pick fruit and other things of that nature. Together, it's also for funding. You squatted. Bob, you always like you always smile at that things of that nature. That's just a good Midwestern way of putting things there. So, but you think about squatting. You squatted for toileting purposes more. And you see in some societies that squatting for the toileting and the squatting for deep squats, that strengthen ankles and other things. So you had things, you had the lunging, you had the climbing, you had the pulling, you had the pushing. Those were things that really kept our bodies active, kept them healthy, helped them structurally. And that's the ancestral movements that as we've gotten more and more into this digital age, that we've gotten away from. So we want to take you back to an understanding of those and what those provided in those times. So before we move into that section, Breck, I think you had something to share with us.
Yeah, no, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this half hour. Improve your energy level, enhance cognitive function, support healthy aging while boosting your immune system with 85 plus trace elements and minerals. It's the pure Himalayan Shilajit. Let's show it here on TikTok as well. So the Shilajit is known for its various health benefits due to the rich mineral content and bioactive compounds. This brand is by Better ALT or Better Alt, and it's available at thebetteralt.com, GNC, and other fine retailers. I'll also leave a link here in the show notes for those that are listening to the podcast. Now back to the show.
Thank you, Breck. And as we go along, anytime people, we welcome your questions. So put them in the chat, put them on either it's Facebook, TikTok, or on Zoom here. Those who are joining us live, go on Zoom, go ahead and break in at any time and ask a question. I encourage you to do that. But so now, just quickly, I'll take you back through what we saw, the basic ancestral movements. So they were squatting, lunging, pushing, pulling, climbing, twisting. I didn't mention before, that's rotating. And so the key thing now to understand with those, and you have the context, is what's the benefits of those movements? What do they provide for us today to undertake? So with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Bob, our posture guru and dynamic muscle release guy, to really focus in on that for us a little bit.
Well, this is really a hard topic because, the movements that were done, hundreds of years ago, starting then, and even before that, those were, living life, surviving, before, as you said, before the farming came and before the industrial revolution. Human beings were doing all kinds of movements way back when, including the ones you mentioned. And then when we moved into farming, I think we had the same kind of movements done. People who worked on the farm were really doing all these movements of the squatting and the lunging and the bending and the twisting, etc. Then when we got to the Industrial Revolution, we started having people working in the factories and doing repetitive movements. That's where I think a lot of the problems started, because in terms of dysfunctional movements, because when you're doing a repetitive movement over and over and over again, that can cause a problem, and it shuts out all kinds of other movements that could be done, right? We focus on one movement, putting this widget in that place, this widget in that place, and then, that's that. So, as we started to modernize, we started to get into trouble in terms of movement. And then you've got the normal issues that come through people living the way we live, where, if somebody has tension in their neck and their shoulders, well, all the ancestral movements in the world are not going to help them get rid of the tension in the neck or shoulders, unless they're putting a basket on top of their head, like is done in certain countries in Africa, where they walk around with by balancing themselves. And if you have your head forward, you're not going to last very long. So just wasted. So I've devoted a lot of my life to studying improper movement and how to repair or fix improper movement. So I just bring up the forward head posture because almost everybody has it. Go, Tim.
Yeah. You have any thoughts on the strength that I've got some thoughts, but I want to get your thoughts first, and I know Breck have some as well. And then you have any thoughts on the strength that these movements provide to people versus other things?
Well, the strength. Okay. Well, movement is vital for healthy living. I mean, if people aren't moving, forget it. It's just going to be bad news. So people have to move, and it's important they move properly. When I look at all the stuff that comes from the ancestral movement arena, when I relate it to today, it's like, how do we perform those key movements like squatting and lunging and pushing and pulling and bending and twisting? And I think when you look at young kids, like toddlers even, they're doing all this stuff properly. They stand up straight and they walk around and they squat down and they bend over and everything's being done the way it was meant to be done. And then they get indoctrinated into all the way we live our life today, right? Where we're always looking down on our devices, or even in every chair that is car seat. I'm just trying to show you the car seats are all like that. They're never like this. They're all like this, right? And then the headrests are like this because everybody's got a forward head posture. So you need to have the head closer to the headrest. So, that's a real problem, because we've come to this situation where all the chairs, have us leaning back. And then if we're going to have our head over our shoulders where it belongs, we're looking up in the air, can't see anything. So we have to bring our head down forward. And that causes the contraction of the front of the neck muscles. So I just wanted to say some of the abnormal movement patterns that exist today because of the way we evolved away from ancestral movements to where we are today.
Right.
Yep.
Breck, anything you want to put in there before I pontificate?
Yeah, no, I just think about the recent documentary about the blue zones, and why people are living so much longer in certain parts of the world, and the two examples of ancestral movement that came to mind were the countries where people sit on the floor, and so even your elderly population is having to get up and down from a sitting position because they, that's their culture. You sit down on the floor. Others blue zone was, some of the islands, over in Europe that whole towns and villages are built right on the side of the mountain, and so there's stairs everywhere, and just to even go to church. And some of those really faithful go to church more than just on Sunday, right? They're going multiple times up to church. So they're literally climbing, 30 flights of steps just to get to to the church 3 or 4 times a week. So those obviously are something that's been around for hundreds of years and still exists today.
Right. So it keeps them active, keeps them strong. We avoid the thing of balance problems that I used to have to deal with as I worked with many of the elderly when I ran a home care business. But I will say, and I think those movements and that type of work gives you a type of strength that is hard to duplicate by getting into the gym. I remember watching a few years back, there was an episode of Survivor, man. Guy looked extremely well cut, that he was having difficulty lifting and doing one of the challenges there. But I could look at him and I could tell where that muscle came from. And he was having challenges, problem doing it. My wife said, "I can't believe he's having those challenges." I said, "That's gym muscle. That's not work muscle. That's not natural muscle. That's gym muscle." And there's a difference there. And I'll give you another example. When I was just a 10th grader and I wrestled this guy from West Point, we were in Wahoo, Nebraska. I wrestled a guy from West Point, Nebraska, who I knew worked on a farm. I'd never seen, he shot it on me for a double leg, just had his fingertips on the back of my thighs. 99% of people that have been no problem getting away from. I could feel the strength in that grip and him sucking me in through that. And it was real tough to get away from that. One more thing, and I don't know if this is an apocryphal story or not, but I'm going to tell it like it's true because I've always heard it to be true. And people go back to Sonny Liston, who, for sports aficionados and boxing fans, one of the best heavyweight boxers of all time. Unfortunately, best known for getting beat by Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay at the time. But they say that Sonny Liston, that the mule died, and his father was so mean that basically his father turned him into a mule and made him pull the plow. And just that, and he became one of the most devastating punchers around. So those types of movements, but that I can't, I didn't see it firsthand. People say that's the truth. I'm going to accept it, but I have seen in wrestlers and in others that strength developed by that type of work and movement, and it is different than that of others. And hence, I think more is, and what's the benefit of that? That's better for daily living. That's better for maintaining your vigor. Than I think. Shouldn't discount if you've got to get to the gym, and I go to the gym and do it that way. But if you can get some of these natural movements, I'm all for them. So that's some of my benefits, Dr. Bob.
Well, when I was playing college football, I used to lift weights a lot, especially in high school before college. But then when I got to college, they had us take a test where we had to do the maximum number of pull-ups, the maximum number of dips, the maximum number of push-ups, and in a certain period of time, right? Mm-hmm. So I worked all summer long just on that stuff, pull-ups, dips, and and it was phenomenal because I could build this natural strength without having to use the weights at all, just using my body, which I found was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the days of the presidential tests, right? You'd have to do so many pull-ups or even just the bar hangs where you'd have to just hang there for a certain amount of time. And those have kind of gone away. And unfortunately, there's now pacer tests and other things like that. But I just heard Senator Kennedy talking about this, that like 70% of U.S. Kids today can't even pass the military fitness exams. 70%.
Yeah, we have a real catastrophe. I mean, going on. Over 50% of Americans are obese, and the kids population is a total disaster. And we got to do something about it. So and nobody's moving. That's the thing. So you got to get movement in, and so when you look at what our ancestors were doing, they were moving. All these different movements they were making, and it's not happening today. When I was younger, we were out playing all day long and all night long when we weren't in school, right? And that's just the way it was. And so it's not that way today.
Right.
Yeah.
The type of play we did was all those ancestral movements. We had a little high jump set up in the thing, so we were running and jumping. We'd climb the trees and pick various fruit that was in the neighborhood from people that had different type of trees there, and get in trouble with the neighbors for stealing their fruit and all those. And and actually, I wouldn't play, but we actually had a number of us had little gardens in the neighborhood. So you were pulling the holes, regular holes through them a little bit. Use a little side to cut down some of the weeds. So all those things of that type. But now Breck, related to that and being able to ways to kind of keep other ways of replicating that ancestral movements. I know you had looked into a number of things just from your own ancestral history and what was done and culture. And I want you to share a little bit of that and the other things that you've thought about.
Yeah. So, I mean, first it started out purely from survival, right? We had to hunt and gather our food, and then it became, farming was something that needed to be done. So you'd already mentioned about, having to plow fields and being able to plant. So my heritage, comes from English, Irish, some Scottish, all that area. And you look at also the different folk dances, right? And those were also incorporating movement. So it wasn't all just about survival and farming and hard labor and moving rocks out of your field so you could plow it. There was some fun that was incorporated too in games and dancing. So, there's obviously the, English folk dances, and then the on the Irish side, the Irish jigs that, or you've seen the, Lords of the Dance with the really fast foot movements. Just a funny side note, when any of my kids were ever, grumpy, and I told them, they needed to change their attitude, or I would river dance. And
They'll do anything to stop that, right?
they do anything to stop that, because we might be in public, and I would just break out in a river dance right there in a public
Wow.
place to get, and they'd always crack up laughing when that bad mood would change pretty quickly.
Now,
Yeah.
were you good, Breck? Were you a good river dancer?
Well, if you just move your feet fast enough and then flip a leg up here and there, no one can tell the difference. You just got to move really, really fast. But yeah, I don't know if I was doing it proper or not. But yeah, but the games, things like tug of war and wrestling, go all the way back to to early settlements. And anytime that groups got together, you always had to show your strength, right? And throwing stones and picking up large items and doing different things like that. One of the funny things about the Irish culture, I mentioned that is in the emails that I sent out to remind people about the podcast today, is hurling. And I asked, who else had any hurlers in their heritage or their ancestry. Well, that was a Irish tradition, and it's basically combining running and then throwing a wooden stick to hit a ball. And so there's a lot of skill and physical ability that needed to be honed in on to be able to do hurling, which I don't see much of that type of sport anymore today. Maybe baseball, hitting a ball, but you hang on to the bat. You don't throw the wooden stick at the ball. But and then you would get together, different tribes would get together in different settlements to do their games, the Gaelic games. So there's a form of Gaelic football and handball and other traditional sports of running and jogging and kicking and throwing. And so we we talked a little bit about this in earlier episodes, that I wasn't a D1 athlete like you two, but I have run quite a few marathons, and maybe that was an ancestral pastime. And sure enough, you go back into into the Gaelic history of that was one of the sports that they did do, was running.
And you take the running thing. We do have the ultra marathons and the triathlons that kind of test people as well. But in my early days, I used to read a lot about Native Americans. I don't know why it attracted me, but it just did as a youth. And I used to read about there were some tribes in the Southwest that used to say they would run down a deer for miles after coming
Yeah.
into. So you talk about that for then I watched I don't know, I watched the show. I don't know if we'll get dinged on any of our platforms for the name of the show, but I'll say it anyway. Called Alone. You two ever watch Alone?
No.
Not
And
familiar with that one.
what they do is they take it's a little different than similar to Naked and Afraid, but a little different in this mannerism. They take people out there and they give them some primitive. They let them take 10 items, and there's now a lone Australia and there's a lone Arctic Circle going on now, and they put them out there and they've got to go hunt, fish, um, scavenge, whatever they do to be able to survive out there alone. And I see them wearing, and certainly they're probably out there longer than I could be, but I see them wearing down in days. And I say, well, you look at that as opposed to people who had to do that. Days were nothing to them. And when you can run under 100 miles, as I've heard some of the Native Americans did, to run down a game animal, that's what that ancestral movement and hardiness and resilience can do for someone. And that's the potential that's in our bodies still today to be able to do that if it's done correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, my whole practice with people is based on the fact that that we transitioned away from those original movements that people would do reliably and regularly to the way we live now, which is everybody's getting into trouble with back pain, hip pain, neck pain, shoulder pain because of these improper movements. And so it's too bad, really, because if people knew how to move properly, they could easily take care of all this stuff, and then I could retire and go out of business. But
Yeah.
they're not ready. People aren't ready.
That's part of our purpose to make America and the world healthy again.
That's right.
And on that same lines, that's the whole purpose and idea behind our Facebook group, the Healthcare Disruptors WellwaveNOW Facebook group that has about 4,000 plus members in there now. And make sure that you're following the comments, because there was someone specifically asking about walking, Dr. Bob, and I don't know if you saw that comment, but they were needing some more instruction about proper walking.
Well, I mean, the easiest thing for people to do with proper walking is, instead of looking down at the ground, which is what most people are doing, if you watch people, you'll see 80% of the people, 80% of the time, looking down when they walk. It's really important to look up and look long, right? It helps.
Yep.
And you don't lose your balance when you're looking up. If you're looking down at the ground, it's really hard. It can lead to falls and challenges that way. It's like in a car. If you try and drive your car and you look right over the front of the car and try and stay in your lane, how much harder it is to do than when you're driving and looking in the distance. It's easy to follow a path, So that's just the number one thing. Look up. The second thing is proper arm swing. You got to get the shoulders movement and you got to get the arms swinging. And that's really, really important. So I have the 7 steps to proper walking. Those are the 2 easiest to implement that people should do. Look up and get some proper arm swing.
Right. Yeah. And the proper arm swing, right, was a necessity back in the ancestral times. If you had to walk 10, 15 miles a day, you better walk properly and be able to do that efficiently and
well, see, yeah, exactly. The body will adjust to whatever the demands are on it. So but what I wanted to say is, if people are locking their arms and their arms are not moving at all, normally the arms should move like this. If the arms are just not moving at all, it takes muscle power and energy to keep those arms in place, not letting them move. So people get tired from walking instead of just allowing the arms to rock back and forth.
You start to feel tension in your shoulders, and when you're teaching someone to ski, you got to look past the tree. Don't look at the tree, right? Because you're going to go right to where you're looking. That's so right. Look past the tree.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
see, Breck, you keep hiding all these athletic talents from us. Skiing, marathoning, river dancing, so there's.
Yeah, there you go. Snowboarding and skiing. One of my best friends, African American lady, I asked her, if she skied, and she goes, "No, my people don't do that." And I was like, "Well, is it too cold?" And she said, "No, we're not afraid of the cold. We're afraid of death." And I'm like, "It's not dangerous if you know what you're doing."
Yeah, well,
Well,
skiing is kind of a challenging sport to teach. It's come a long way since I learned how to ski. But
Yep.
but so some of those, so Bob, you talked about the proper walking, which I got, and how to do it. I see that as a way, so towards the path of how do you integrate these things into your daily life. So either one of you have any comments on, how do you start getting this ancestral movement integrated into your daily life to be able to do it and recapture some of that resilience.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the time where if anyone has any questions, we'd certainly want to address them. And I know that we've kind of touched on, if you're living a pretty sedimentary life, your job is at a desk and you're sitting all day long, how to incorporate more of ancestral movements into your daily routine. And so I've come up with a list of different things that would help with that, and happy to cover those with you right now. The very first thing has to do with last week's episode in movement snacks. We've actually talked about it for a couple of weeks now, and having movement snacks. So actually set up, every 30 to 60 minutes, kind of have an opportunity to stretch, move, and use those breaks to perform simple ancestral movements that have been mentioned before, like squats and lunges and shoulder rolls. And so that's a get into a habit of every 60 minutes or so. Stretching routines, incorporate stretching, whether it be some kind of a yoga stretch or Tai Chi movements. Also chair exercises. So just even there sitting, you can do leg lifts, lift your feet up off the ground. I'm always constantly pumping my calves when I'm sitting down after hearing Dr. Bob talk about how that helps with blood pressure. You got to get the blood recirculating up from your lower extremities. So I do that now while sitting in the chair. You can also do spiral twists as well, and that helps with your joint mobility and circulation. Take walking meetings. So if you're not, needing to be right in front of your computer, it can be on your cell phone. I love to do that when the weather is not as hot, and it's starting to cool off here finally in Arizona. But when it's not so hot, I love taking phone meetings while I walk around the park behind our home.
yeah, yeah,
Also,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, desk yoga, stretches like the cat cow. I was hoping someone here today could demonstrate what the cat cow is, because I'm not familiar with that yoga pose, but you can do what's called desk yoga. And I can provide more information on that if you're interested. And then active commuting, if you go into an office, is it close enough that you can walk there or cycle to work? My office happens to be right across the hall from my, bedroom, so it's not much of a walk. But I've mentioned before that the kitchen is downstairs, so if I want a snack, I'm going up and down the stairs quite often, getting my stair steps in.
Yeah, I think people need to have the mindset of how do I incorporate movements all the time, everywhere? Do I park further away from the door of the store and then walk across the parking lot?
Yeah.
Everything. People need to understand that they need to be moving more, and if they do that, it's going to help their health.
Yeah. I'm jealous of my son's work setup. He's got one of those standing desks. So at some point in time in the future, I'd like to incorporate that and have a standing desk so I can do more standing. Lunchtime movement. Take part of your lunch break to go for a walk or do some short yoga routine or Tai Chi session.
Is that a
And
movement
then,
snack? It's a movement snack you just
Movement
described.
times, there you go.
yeah, absolutely. Lunchtime movement stack.
Yeah.
And then, the reminders, I thought it was funny when Apple Watch incorporated that it's time to stand on your Apple Watch, but it's great to set reminders
So
on your
important.
computer. Yeah.
So important. I mean,
And there are other apps that'll do that for you, but you could just set a reminder right on your computer to pop off every, hour or so.
Right.
Yeah. And then,
go
was
ahead.
there something else? I just got one more item here, and that'd be incorporating, ancestral play. So part of that is if you're, standing in the bank line or you're in the grocery line waiting for checkout. If you're not, don't embarrass your kids like me in river dance, but balance on one leg while you're standing in line. That's actually an ancestral movement, and then and maybe not in public, but in privacy, dancing. We've talked about that before when the Fitbits came out, and you used to be able to monitor each other's steps and how many steps everyone was taking. We had a challenge in our family, and one family member was getting twice as many steps as everyone. We're like, she's like put that on her dog and had her dog run around or something. There's no way she's getting twice as much movement. It was that she was dancing while she was doing her household chores, vacuuming and whatever. She was dancing the whole time, and that's why she was getting so many more movement steps in than the rest of us.
Fantastic. Funny.
And Dr. Bob, here's a question that I'm hoping you'll address that came in. It says, are there any specific ancestral movements that are particularly beneficial for back pain or the posture issues?
Well, yeah, like 100 of them, but yeah. So I think the most for in our current society, the most important movement for chronic back pain is for people to understand that they need to contract their abdominal muscles more when they're bending over. Like anytime somebody is bending at the waist, as soon as, even before initiating the bend, contract the abdominal muscles and then bend at the waist and keep those abdominal muscles contracted as you come back up, and then only relax them when you get up straight again. That balances the muscles between the stomach and the back. It gives the back muscles the knowledge and the feeling that they're supported, so they don't have to take care of all of the weight that's coming when they bend over. So, and I encourage people to take their hand and put it in their abdominal compartment when they bend over, just to make sure those abdominal muscles are contracting. So that's for back pain. That's really, really important. In fact, I have something. If people go to, I think they can go to meetdrbob.com. Meetdrbob.com. I have a gift where I describe that whole sequence of events for bending at the waist and why it's important. So if people want to get that, they can go there. So that's one of many different movements, and I think that the squat needs to be done a lot more. People need to get those knees bending more, because most people are no longer bending their knees. They're bending over at the waist, keeping their legs straight instead of doing the squatting down. So that, to me, keeping those knees moving is really, really important. Otherwise, they just get all messed up as we get older. So,
and
there's another question that came in, Tim. Maybe you can address this, and that's how do ancestral movement patterns complement or enhance your modern forms of exercise like weightlifting or cardio?
Yeah. See, for me, it's the way I looked at it, especially after that. I remember the guy's name. First name was Jay, that wrestler that I told you about. I don't remember the last name that we had there. But after that, I started thinking about ways to use to incorporate and get some of that natural strength and use it. So I often look at one way I look at those natural moves that complement the other one. So I get in the gym. Those are isolation. A lot of those you can do more complex multi-muscle gym movements like a squat and a clean and jerk, things of that type. However, a lot of it's very isolationist development. So therefore, but if you look at most of the ancestral movements, the climbing, the pulling, the squatting, the lunging, those are all combination ones. So I always look at those as a way of making those muscles I build up in the gym, making them functional for use. And that functional use was very important as a wrestler, because you take a look at that wrestling, that really is all functional strength, the twisting, the throwing, but it's also very important for, for life. Think about, and this is a way you can also incorporate and complement some of the, gym exercises, is think about if you're at your sink and you've got your dishwashing liquid down below. The bending for that, squatting for that is being able to be important. If you can't squat, that makes it more difficult. And if you bend incorrectly, then you get into problems that Bob talked about. So that's complementing. And the way also you can, if you can complement the general exercise by, you're usually doing that as a circle. Well, what about as you on a circuit? What about as you move from station to station, you go ahead and just do body weight lunges to get to the next station? What about if you're waiting in between the set, go ahead and just do some body weight squats and a whole lot of things. And one thing I was going to comment with on Bob's part again is, when you're lifting weights, sometimes they tell you to stay away from the deep squats because the extra pressure it puts on there. But when you're doing with your body weight, the deeper squats you can get are better for your knees and your stability and strengthening those. So go ahead and do that. Hold on to the desk, hold on to one of the pieces of equipment in between, and do your squats that way to get as low as you can and work over time. So I think, I think how they complement the ancestral movements, integrate what you do in the gym and make them functional. You can integrate them in complement a different way, put them into your breaks and your circuit work as you're doing those types of routines to all kind of work them in as well.
Yeah. So I have this technique called effective muscle release, and it's unfortunate that I'm going to be employed for the rest of my life teaching that, because even people who move around a lot, they still are subject to dysfunctional neuromuscular excess contraction that is causing postural misalignments. And a lot of that just happens automatically, or hidden automatic patterns. So, when people understand that and they can train themselves, go to a practitioner like myself or somebody else and get some help in terms of releasing those muscles. Then you have people who assuming they're taking care of themselves from a nutritional standpoint, they can live to 150 years old, and they can have a body structure that can take them all the way. I see older folks breaking down, not because they're not sharp, but because their body structure is breaking down. My grandfather used to walk several miles a day up until the age of 95. Right. And then he had to stop doing that because his body was too, I didn't know it at the time. Now I know how dysfunctional his body posture was and his neuromuscular system was. And if I knew then what I know now, he'd probably still be alive at 110 or 115, whatever, because he couldn't handle it.
Yeah. Any other questions that we have from the audience we can address?
Well, I think there's one that we didn't fully address before. I talked about, we gave a lot on the benefits of this ancestral movement and how they work as medicine. But I think there are other ones as I went back and thought about that. And I just kind of took the time to write them down as we were going through here that I want to make sure the audience is at least aware of. If you look at this list of what this ancestral movement really does for you, especially in light of what you and Bob have talked about. Number one, we talked about the improved functional strength. So that's key to living. That's true. But it's also the mobility and flexibility, that is necessary for daily life, that this really encourages and keeps the elasticity in the soft tissues and just the function. And if you do enough of this, it properly lubricates the joint. So you've got that portion of it. Dr. Bob always talks about, pulling in the stomach. So these types of things, the squatting, the lunging, the climbing, that improves that core strength to be able to keep that thing and goes intact and do that. And one of the key things, I think there are others, but one of the key things that it always gives me, I think, back a little bit from what Bob was saying about his elderly relative, to maybe flash back again to, I did rent a home care agency for the elderly for 8 years. And that was one of the worst things people always told us to keep their loved one from falling. It became a fall risk. It's these types of exercises, the squatting, the lunging, the turning safely, that keeps those, one, helps you maintain that sense of where your body is in its positioning to be able to react. But number two, also strengthens and keeps intact the stabilization muscles and ability to adjust. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tim, I'm glad you covered that, because we've been really focusing on the enhanced function and strength and joint movement and everything, but I'm glad that you covered injury prevention, because that is everything that we're talking about really prevents injury. Think about everything that Dr. Bob's talked about with posture. And goes back to, if you're proper lifting, right? You're not going to put your back out if you're actually engaging your core muscles and squatting and lifting with your legs, not your back. So yeah, all of these things prevent injury, and then also if injury does occur, then you have a much quicker rehabilitation.
Yep.
Great.
True.
That's all the questions that I saw coming through. And
I have one question, if you don't mind.
Not quite. Go right ahead, Marcia.
At one point, what I heard, part of the reason we have such back problems and everything else is because we started to stand straight on a regular basis, as opposed to moving on all fours in some semblance. Maybe the back legs did more work than the hands, but we weren't as rigid. I'm just wondering if that allows still the speed to go after the game that you need to survive, to eat, but as well as having better physical health.
Okay, I need a further explanation about that question.
In essence, by being on all fours or being bent down the ground as opposed to standing up straight, it wasn't as much stress on the back.
I think over time, human beings were designed quite well to stand up straight and not have back problems. Back problems are more of a problem of our recent societal activities and the way people are sitting at their desks. What do they say? Sitting is the new smoking or something like that. Yeah. And so, people need to be, first of all, if you're sitting at your desk and you don't want to be there because you don't feel right about it, then your ergonomics is bad. You got to fix your ergonomics. You got to be able to sit at your desk for 8 hours without even getting up. And then if you could, now I don't recommend that. I'm just saying, if you want to test your ergonomic position, is your monitor in the right place? Is your keyboard in the right place? Is your chair correct for your body? When you can sit there for hours at a time and not be subjected to, oh man, I got tension in my neck and checking tension in my shoulders and my arm, and from the mousing and everything. That's the way your ergonomics is okay. Now, I personally recommend getting up every 30 minutes or so and doing a movement snack, getting out there, walking. There, go ahead. Right.
I was just going to say, just even mouses now, like that you can keep your hand upright like this to move a mouse, rather than, because a lot of carpal tunnel from typing and moving the mouse with your hand laid down. Yeah, there you go. The more upright mouse.
I use the trackball.
Yeah. So once again, I'm kind of with you, Dr. Bob.
Oh my gosh.
I think one can put strain on their back through a lot of activities that are upright, but we were designed to walk upright. And I think it's holding that posture correctly, moving correctly, keeping the muscles strong yet flexible through the type of movements we're talking about, by doing the right type of twisting, the bending, but maintaining the strength of the core. And that core is more than just the stomach muscles. It's the back muscles, it's the hip muscles. That's the core. Working those through these movements, I think people can go through their life without if they prudently go through life. You think about Tiger Woods these days. As now Tiger's an old man, but he had the leg problems, but he torqued that body so much in his twisting that he went beyond what was prudent and from what I understand. And so now he's got the back issues. So it goes back to old Clint Eastwood movie that I'll paraphrase. It says a person's got to know their limitations. You work within those properly within those limitations. I think you can walk upright for a lifetime without back problems.
Well, excellent. I think this has been a really great podcast and great information. We've covered a lot of ground. So excellent. Appreciate all of your input.
So we see you next time. Be well.
Take care, everybody.